I left this Wall Street firm in the middle of the year. When you do that, you walk away from your annual bonus. One of the things that everybody should realize, and that is probably the single most important factor, is that if you can project yourself out to age 80 and sort of think, what will I think at that time? It gets you away from some of the daily pieces of confusion. And the short term can confuse you, but if you think about the long term, then you can really make good life decisions that you won't regret later. Most regrets, by the way, are acts of omission and not commission. I knew that when I was 80, I was not going to regret having tried this. I knew that if I failed, I wouldn't regret that. Trying to participate in this thing called the internet that I thought was going to be a really big deal. But I knew the one thing I might regret is not ever having tried. And I knew that that would haunt me every day. When I thought about it that way, it was an incredibly easy decision.
What I want to talk to you about today is the difference between gifts and choices. Tomorrow, in a very real sense, your life, the life you author from scratch on your own, begins. How will you use your gifts? Will you guard your heart against rejection? Or will you act when you fall in love? Will you play it safe? Or will you be a little bit swashbuckling? Will you be clever at the expense of others? Or will you be kind? Cleverness is a gift. Kindness is a choice. Gifts are easy. They're given after all. Choices can be hard. You can seduce yourself with your gifts if you're not careful. And if you do, it'll probably be to the detriment of your choices. I'm sure one of your gifts is the gift of a smart and capable brain. Your smarts will come in handy because you will travel in a land of marvels. We humans, plodding as we are, will astonish ourselves. Atom by atom, we'll assemble small machines that can enter cell walls and make repairs. Jules Verne, Mark Twain, Galileo, Newton, all the curious from the ages would have wanted to be alive, most of all, right now. As a civilization, we will have so many gifts. How will you use these gifts? And will you take pride in your gifts or pride in your choices? Will you bluff it out when you're wrong? Or will you apologize? Will you choose a life of ease or a life of service and adventure? Will you wilt under criticism? Or will you follow your convictions? I got the idea to start Amazon 16 years ago. I came across the fact that web usage was growing at 2,300% per year.
But things just don't grow that fast. It's highly unusual.
The idea of building an online bookstore with millions of titles, something that simply couldn't exist in the physical world, was very exciting to me. I just turned 30 years old, and I'd been married for a year. I told my wife, Mackenzie, that I wanted to quit my job and go do this crazy thing that probably wouldn't work, since most startups don't, and I wasn't sure what would happen after that.
At the time we launched this business, it wasn't even crystal clear that the technology would improve fast enough that ordinary people, non-computer people, would even want to bother with this technology.
I was working at a financial firm in New York City with a bunch of very smart people, and I had a brilliant boss I much admired. I went to my boss and told him I was going to start a company selling books on the internet. I didn't think I'd regret trying and failing. And I suspected I would always be haunted by a decision to not try at all. He took me on a long walk in Central Park, listened carefully to me, and finally said, "That sounds like a really good idea, but it would be an even better idea for someone who didn't already have a good job." That logic made some sense to me, and he convinced me to think about it for 48 hours before making a final decision. Seen in that light, it really was a difficult choice, but ultimately, I decided I had to give it a shot.
I went away and was trying to find the right framework in which to make that kind of big decision. And I'd already talked to my wife about this, and she was very supportive and said, look, you can count me in 100%.
As a young boy, I'd been a garage inventor. I'd invented an automatic gate closer out of cement-filled tires, a solar cooker that didn't work very well out of an umbrella and aluminum foil. I'd always wanted to be an inventor, and she wanted me to follow my passion.
She had married this kind of, fairly stable guy in a stable career path, and now he wanted to go do this crazy thing, but she was 100% supportive. So it really was a decision that I had to make for myself.
After much consideration, I took the less safe path to follow my passion, and I'm proud of that choice. What choices will you make? Will inertia be your guide, or will you follow your passions? Will you follow dogma, or will you be original? When it's tough, will you give up, or will you be relentless? Will you be a cynic, or will you be a builder?
There are a lot of entrepreneurs. There are a lot of people who are very smart, very hardworking. Very few ever have, the planetary alignment that leads to a tiny little company growing into something substantial. So there are a whole bunch of things that have to sort of align to make it work. That's certainly what happened to us. Our timing was good. Our choice of product categories, books, was a very good choice. And we did a lot of analysis on that to pick that category as the first best category for e-commerce online. Tried to get a lot of the little housekeeping details done even before we arrived in Seattle. And so you set about doing the simple things first. So you want to start a company. Well, the first thing you do is you should write a business plan. So that's the first step. I wrote a first draft. In fact, I wrote the first draft on the car trip from the East Coast to the West Coast. That blank sheet of paper stage is one of the hardest stages, and one of the reasons it's hard is because at that stage there's nobody counting on you but yourself. Today it's easy because we've got millions of customers counting on us, and thousands of investors counting on us, and then thousands of employees all counting on each other. But in that beginning stage, it's really just you. And you can quit any time. Nobody's going to care. But the business plan won't survive its first encounters with reality. It will always be different. But the discipline of writing the plan forces you to think through some of the issues and to get sort of mentally comfortable in the space. If you push on this knob, this will move over here, and so on. I called a friend who lived in Seattle, asked if he recommended an attorney. He said yes, he recommended his divorce lawyer. But that's who we used. He asked me on the cell phone, what name would you like the company incorporated under? I said, Cadabra, as in abracadabra. And he said, cadaver? And I knew then that was not going to be a good name. But writing the business plan, the initial hiring, getting the company incorporated, all these are, they're very, in a way, they're sort of, simple, almost pedestrian tasks, but that's how you start, one step at a time. The first sort of initial startup capital for Amazon.com came primarily from my parents, and they invested a large fraction of their life savings in what became Amazon.com. It was a very bold and trusting thing for them to do. And I told them that I thought there was a 70% chance that they would lose their whole investment, which was a few $100,000. And they did it anyway. And my dad's first question was, what's the internet? Okay, so he wasn't making a bet on this company or this concept. He was making a bet on his son.
And when we launched that store in July of 1995, we were shocked at the customer response. Literally in the first 30 days, we had orders from all 50 states and 45 different countries. And we talked to our landlord and we expanded into a 2,000 square foot basement warehouse space. And then we would spend all afternoon and into the wee hours of the morning packing up the orders and shipping them out. I would drive these things to UPS, and so we get the last one and we wait to the last second. And they always would take pity on me and sort of open up and let us ship things late. That early stage, by the way, of Amazon.com, where we were so unprepared, is probably one of the luckiest things that ever happened to us, because we had to work with our hands so close to the customers, making sure those orders went out, really set up a culture that served us well.